Hello, everyone. It's Larry Kotlikoff back with Economics Matters, the podcast. I'm delighted to have my old friend and Ariel Rubinstein as our guest today. Ariel and we just discovered are the same age. I'm 3 months older, and therefore, uh, I'd like to say wiser, but I'm not quite sure that holds. But Ariel is one of the world's foremost economists. There's no question about it. I have often thought about what I would do if I ever retired. My retirement plan so far has been to retire a year after I die. And but having looked today at Ariel's CV, uh, I realized that if I were to retire, one thing I could do is just spend every let's say day reading one of his articles or trying to read one of his articles. And that would be much better than playing golf or bowling or anything like that. So
Exaggerate a little bit.
you guys are, well, let me just tell you a little bit about Ariel's background here. So he's a professor of economics at the School of Economics at Tel Aviv University, and he's also professor of economics at the Department of Economics at NYU, New York University. He received his BA in mathematics, economics, and statistics from Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and also his PhD at Hebrew University in economics. And he's been working as a game theorist, but also studying not just kind of standard game theory, or well, not standard. He's kind of made game. He's developed lots and lots of new game theory over the years that people routinely study. But he's also focused from the beginning and maybe increasingly on bounded rationality, uh, to some extent on behavioral economics. He might be viewed as really one of the founders or the founder of behavioral economics, if that's not an exaggeration. He has uh, if I look at his CV, and everybody should take a peek at this, you'll find that he's given, I think, he has all kinds of honors: Rothschild Fellow, uh, uh, honorary member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, has the Israel Prize. The list just goes on. I've I don't think I've ever seen a list of honors this extensive, but I haven't looked at every Nobel laureate or Nobel laureate candidate, and certainly Ariel is on my short list, probably at the top of the list for getting the Nobel Prize. He's given 25 named lectures. That's every top lecture in economics Ariel has delivered, including the Rosenthal lecture at Boston University back in 2008. Um, and then he's given special lectures, 38 of those. He has, uh, if you look at his books, he has 9 books. You can go 8 books that you can download for free at his website. Just Google Ariel Rubinstein, you'll find his website. And then articles that continue to come out in the very top journals. And we're talking about 130. The CV lists 113, but another one was just added called Magical Implementation with Jacob Glazer, who used to be at BU, is back in Israel. So we have 114 fantastic articles in economics, and they have all kinds of name titles. Some are really intriguing. Equilibrium in a civilized jungle. Jungle equilibrium. Uh, that's we're going to get into that, I hope, because I'm going to have Ariel talk about his favorite uh, works. Uh, we have a model of persuasion with bounded rational agents that was written back in 2012. jungle economics. Equilibrium is more recent. Magical implementation is the very latest, as I mentioned. We have a classic article uh, on equilibrium uh, um, bargaining that everybody reads in game theory. We have just the absent-minded driver's paradox. So some of these, but then we have other articles that are, uh, you know, very, let's say, theoretical in terms of their description. Instinctive. Well, so actually, most of the titles, Edgar Allan Poe's riddle: do guessers outperform misleaders in a repeated matching pennies game? Earlier on, the titles were a little more inside the ballpark. Um, Reputation and patience in the war of attrition, the complexities of strategies and the resolution of conflict. So the Nash bargaining solution in economic modeling, algebraic aggregation theory. So early in his career, he was sticking closer to titles that were going to be more readily accepted by economic journals and editors, but then the titles always had a bit of a twist to trying to connect and make people kind of sit up and think that they're going to learn something more than just narrow economics about the real world. But I want to, first of all, thank you, Ariel, for doing this. I know you're asked to give podcasts all the time, and you're a busy bee. You're becoming, as it seems to me, more productive over time rather than less. As I think that's a kind of an interesting lesson for everybody, that there's no reason that as you get older that you have to slow down. Really, economics would say that you have fewer years left to produce, so you better speed things up, make sure you get everything done that you want to get done. And that's also true for academics in terms of uh, thinking, working harder and working faster. So, Ariel, give us a little background to start. Let's start off talking about how you got into economics and how you got into economic theory and behavioral economics. A little bit of that, and then let's kind of flip to what's going on in your neck of the woods. You have work on jungle equilibrium. We've got a bit of a jungle in the Middle East right now. It would be good for everybody to understand, since you're sitting right now in Tel Aviv, how you view the situation in the Middle East, uh, and what your geopolitical views are, perhaps not just about the Middle East, but also maybe Ukraine, China. If you have any views at all about those issues. I know, you're reluctant to think that economics can really tell us definitively anything about the real world because it's a little too abstract. But on the other hand, you've gone further than other people in trying to connect economics to uh, the way people behave. Uh, so let's talk about that, and then we'll get into your favorite hits here of this fantastic career that's just started, as far as I can tell. So take away, tell us where you were born, and a little bit about the background, how you got into economics to begin with, and why you stayed.
Thanks, Larry. Well, you mentioned already so many topics, and I feel that we will not have time to cover all of them, but let's start. I'm an Israeli, and I'm very proud about it. I was born in the most wonderful place in the world, namely Jerusalem, in 1951. Most of my life I was living in Jerusalem, although now I'm living in Tel Aviv. From educational point of view, I'm what I would call blue-white, namely purely pure white. I've never considered even studying abroad. I always studying in, all my degrees are from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. My supervisor was Menachem Yaari. from economics department. I started in mathematics, and my choice of mathematics is quite interesting by itself because actually I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a defense lawyer. I wanted to be a warrior for justice. And because of some completely unimportant reason, I was scared to take the law school, to go to law school because my English, as you hear already, even now is quite bad. So I was afraid that at the time, we talk about 1971, that I was afraid that in the law school I will have to read a lot of English because we inherited the English law. And mathematics is just simples. Of course, the truth was just the opposite. Mathematics, I needed mathematics books in English, and you could finish a degree in law in Israel without opening any English article. But in any case, this was my choice, which in some sense I must admit that I sometimes regret that I did not go on this warrior for justice and did not become a defense lawyer. But in any case, why did I choose economics? I started in mathematics because I remember the days at the University of Jerusalem in Givat Ram at the time, studying mathematics and wondering about the meaning of the symbols, the meaning of mathematics in some daily language sense. Now, these were just dreams, just fantasies. But in some sense, this was the essence of what formal economics do. We are looking at symbols. We do some manipulation of symbols using mathematical methods. But at the end of the day, we don't talk about the mathematics. I'm not a mathematician. What we try to do is to find these miracles that this mathematical model somehow have some connection, if at all, to the way that we reason about the real world. So this somehow brought me to economics, and I was fascinated. Now, not by economics in the standard sense of the word. To be honest, I'm not very much interested in the Israeli economy or in the American economy. I'm interested as a citizen, but not as academics. I'm interested actually in the way that people reason, and this was always my fascination. But somehow, rightly or wrongly, I chose a particular path to study this through formal models. By the way, I'm not calling myself game theoretician. I would call myself economic theoretician. But this is just probably just a matter of terminology. So that's brought me to economic theory.
Right. And tell us a little bit about the track of your research. Did it go from, kind of focusing more on pure game theory to behaviorally, what kind of, it seemed like there's a little bit of a transition here, but it was pretty quick.
There was a transition in some sense, but I think that I've never thought about game theory in the standard way that probably many game theoreticians or many applied economists think about game theory. You mentioned my articles that probably, I don't think it's the best article that I wrote, but it's the most famous one of Econometrica 1982 about
Bargaining model.
and I noticed a few years ago, I looked at it again, and I actually was admiring myself about two things. Number one, that the title was not the theory of bargaining, but it was a model of bargaining. So it's not just a matter of modesty, but it was just also the feeling already when I was very young that I'm just building one model. And it's not the model, it's not the model that predicts the world in any way. Actually, I remember one day that I met the late Hugo Zonshine, that later became a very good friend of mine, and he told me, it was around 84, that he and his students studied some experiments of a model which is related to my bargaining model, and I was shocked. Why do you do it? I mean, I don't understand what's the connection between the model and any experimental test. So this one. And second is that if you read the introduction of the paper, actually you will find that actually I'm saying it's not normative, it's not positive. It's not normative, it's not positive. And I think that, of course, I was very naive and very virgin in many respects, but I think that this approach started already then. I think that the big changes that I think probably you referred to were happening. This was quite. I started with social choice, with bargaining, with other repeated games, and then with complexity and issues about rationality. But I think that there was probably some turn around 2000, which is that I became more critical about the way that economic theory is done. And this was not gradual, I think. I mean, this was quite gradual, and it did not come from, again, it did not come from a perspective or a position that I think that I will save the world. I've never thought that I will save the world, definitely not by doing economic theory. But it was probably a reaction to what I've seen, a tyranny. You see, I'm against tyrannies, whatever the tyranny is, whether it's political, whether it's religious, whether it is personal, whether it is whatever. A tyranny makes me angry. And, when we were very young, I'm sure you remember it better than me, you have longer track in economics. Game theory was actually in the margin of the fringe of economics. General equilibrium and other stuff was in the center. Then game theory succeeded enormously. Why it succeeded is probably for another discussion, but it succeeded enormously. It succeeded so much, like any revolution that we know. Any revolution succeeds, and then it becomes a tyranny. That's the cycle of life, probably. And once it becomes a tyranny, I'm turning against it. I'm against it, I'm against the phenomena which are linked with this tyranny. I'm using the word tyranny quite carefully. Because when I talk with economic students these days, and not only these days, or 20 years ago, then what I realized is that again and again and again, when I ask them, why do you do whatever you do? Then immediately they say, well, yes, we turn to game theory because that's what people do. It's not because they thought that it's better than general equilibrium or because of other things, but just because this is the herd is going in this direction. And that's, whenever I hear it, I feel, or they feel that they must do it, because if they don't do it, they will not get a job. And what can I say? People need to survive. So I'm hitting. But I think that this tyranny, and that's actually brought me, you mentioned my latest work that I'm very proud about is a book which came out in April this year, joint with Michael Richter. He was a former student of mine, but that's not connected. We did the work after his studies, and that's a joint work. And if you look at the cover of the book, I don't have it now with me, I would show it. It's the cover is something which we designed. It's a wall of bricks and with some graffiti of the title of the book, and the title of the book is No Prices, No Games. So the idea was to say, okay, here we come with a few economic models, and nobody can deny that these economic models, these are not, and it's not mathematics and it's not sociology, it's economic models which are not belonging neither to the field of general equilibrium or the competitive equilibrium, nor to the concept of game theory. But these are some other models. And beyond what is written there, or beyond the models, which we developed in the last, mostly I did it with him, not only with him, beyond these is also the message that I would like to send, especially to young people. Old people is lost case, but to young people, which is you don't have necessarily to work within this game theory framework. Game theory is not right or wrong. It's just, that when I talk with students, I tell them, there is many literature types in the world. Go to the bookstore, you will find mystery books and love books and war books and so on and so on. This is general equilibrium is one type of literature. Game theory is another type of literature. And of course, there is sub literature there as well. And you can think about another type of literature. And the more heterogeneity we will have, the more diversity, then it will be just more interesting. That's all. It's not right or wrong. It's not that
Really, yeah.
are right. No, they are not right. They are not right. I don't use the word right. They are not true. They are not false. I'm not trying to verify them. I don't think that they are verifiable. It is just like a story. You may like it, you may hate it, but of course it's not just a story, because it's a story which is connected to the interactions that we call economic interactions.
Right. And by, no game, no prices, no games, you're really just by choosing these titles through the years, you're really expanding the, you're letting people, open their brains, open their minds, and realize that economics has lots of different literatures, if you like, that can apply to a particular issue, and that we need to look at outside the box. Now, tell us a bit about this new book. Does it connect to the work on the jungles? Let's talk about retirement for a minute. It's something Americans think about regularly. Ask yourself, how financially secure do you really feel? Do you have enough money to retire? How much is really enough? And if you don't have enough money, how can you possibly find that extra money before you do retire? These are all tough questions. My retirement software, Maxify Planner, is the powerful online planning tool that takes the guesswork out of retirement. It weighs your assets against your fixed expenses to calculate how much you can safely spend every year for the rest of your life based on when you decide to retire. And it shows you safe ways to find more money. Maxify makes a complicated problem like retirement planning simple. It's accurate, easy to use, and produces what you really seek, peace of mind. So make the smart choice and visit Maxify.com today. Don't miss this opportunity. That's Maxify with an I, Maxify, Maxify.com. Now let's get back to the podcast.
Well, John, in some sense, the work with Michele Piccione that I did about 20-something years ago about the jungle equilibrium was the starting of this process. The jungle equilibrium, the idea there was that usually in economics we talk about exchanges, we talk about production, we talk about money, taxation, social security, but there is something else that is very important in the interaction between human beings, and this is power. And power, now, we are not the first to say it. There were other economists who mentioned it already before us, but power is mostly missing from the more economic models. Although, clearly, it is a very important component in the interaction, including the economic interactions between human beings. So we designed a model that we call the jungle equilibrium. The idea there was that people have there is n agents and there are n houses, and the agent says that this is the simple version of the model, and each agent has some preference over the houses, and then the resolution of this conflict, because it may be that many people like to be on the palace, or many people want to settle on the beach, or many people want to settle in Jerusalem. The resolution is done not by economic powers, not by money, not by exchange, but by the fact that if you are stronger than me and you like my house more than the house that you occupy in the moment, you can kick me out of the house. And so this is a sort of interaction which, again, I mean, we talk a lot about interactions between agents that are done mutual consent, right? That's the basic interaction that we think about when we talk about exchange in economics, is that we exchange money for my apartment or whatever. But there are interactions which are just, you force on me, you take for me because you're stronger. With a war or without a war, but you do it. And so this was just the beginning of one example of a model which is not belonging to the no prices, no games. But actually, the latest work in this book is more about some sort of norms that are, the word norm is very tricky, but I will use it. The norms that are sometimes bring harmony into a society. The example, let me just 2 minutes spend on example, which I usually start the lecture with. It's you go to dinner, family dinner. Grandma or grandfather brings a cake that everybody likes, and a traditional cake for Thanksgiving or for Christmas or for Hanukkah or whatever, puts it on the table. Everybody, there are 10 people around the table, everybody wants to get more than 10% of the pie. Nevertheless, what happens there? There is no market. We don't trade money with money for pieces of cake. There is no game theory because there is no auctions. Nobody, grandma or grandfather, don't auction the pie, I hope so. But what is there is that there is some norm that we feel that we don't even consider to take more than 10% of the pie.
And
It's not that I choose not to take 15% of the pie, but it's not done. And the concept of done, what is done and what is not done. I think that the evolution of concepts of done and not done in a society, in a family, in a country, in the Department of Economics or whatever, is fundamental way that we resolve some of the conflicts that are basically economic conflicts and that could be actually resolved in other ways, but nevertheless are resolved through completely different approach. And that's the basic idea. We don't have time to discuss it fully, but the idea is to bring some sort of other social mechanisms that are not related to prices and are not described naturally by games, and nevertheless they are ways to resolve conflicts.
so would you describe this as sociology, or would you say this is economic evolution, that conflict resolution arises through these norms, and so this is an societal economic response or sociological economic response?
The norms resolve the conflict, but it's not just the conflict. There are many conflicts, but these are economic conflicts in the sense that we have some shortage. That's an example with the pie. We have some shortage of resource, right? And we have some preferences, and there is some sort of the preference do not have we have to find some way to live together with the preferences and the shortage, right? I think that's more or less the basic definition of economic problem. So in this respect, I don't think that it's sociology, but it's not very important. It's the economic. We are talking about interaction between human beings. It's not interaction between machines. It's not AI agents. It's human beings like you and me.
When you think about it, I think what you're describing, the division of the cake, the group, if you think about an economics department, people come to seminars, they don't all have to, they work together on hiring, all this kind of group communistic behavior, if you like, is just natural. It might be, if we could have some way of measuring the amount of, in money terms, the amount of GDP that we're voluntarily providing based on social norms, it might be as big as what it could be huge compared to the GDP connected to individual market behavior. Of course, these norms are changing through time. I guess if you have 5 visitors come in and now they want to choose the cake, have some of the cake, or you're going to give them an equal size amount, or you're going to hide the cake in the fridge and wait till they leave.
Exactly, or if some of the people are on diet, and then actually you can exceed the quota that everybody can take. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I've been thinking about this issue about power for a long time too. I just want to interject one thing that I worked on years ago, which was the idea. I was been very focused on generational expropriation through the fiscal system, generational accounting. Worked with that with Alan Auerbach, who's a professor at Berkeley, and Jagdish Gokhale, a former student who's now at Cato. And the idea, is that older generations through time have been expropriating younger ones through the fiscal system, getting more and more benefits, paying fewer taxes, leaving bigger and bigger bills to future generations. And at some point, I just thought to myself, well, what's the limit of this process? Could they basically enslave their children since they're not really altruistic? I mean, the other model is that they're altruistic and they wouldn't harm their kids, and it's one big happy intergenerationally connected family. So if the government were to take from young people, give to old people, the old people are going to save up whatever is given and give it back to the kids when they die, or give it to them as a gift. That idea goes back to Ricardo in 1820. Robert Barrow made it popular. Ricardo wrote about it in one sentence. The next sentence, he said it's stupid that people are altruistic like that. But Barrow said, let's take it seriously. And all of macroeconomics has now gone in that direction in terms of having this single agent altruistic framework. It really dominates because it's a simple, you think about the tyranny of status quo or ideas. Once they get uh, accepted, then everybody else follows along. Emperor's new clothes situation, right? So this is a very simple model to solve, and that's, I think, why it's been used so much, and then everybody else starts using it. But a different way to think about uh, this is that there's some point at which young people can't be expropriated. They're sufficiently strong to fight back. So if you just model that as, let's say, old people and young people having their own uh, political power, and they can't expropriate, they can't impose anything on the other. So now they have to bargain. And that leads to the result that actually, uh, if the old try and, let's say, do something fiscally that will help them and hurt younger people, they have to pay for it in some other manner, maybe agree to some public goods that will be available to younger people. So there's a lot, so you have uh, have a whole different kind of argument for debt neutrality that arises in the context of selfish people. As soon as you allow young people to have power to oppose what old people are trying to impose on them, to block what old people are trying to impose on them. Anyway, it's just a little side statement that this is important and has ramifications for the real world. Uh, let's talk about since we're talking about a little bit about power, let's talk about the Middle East. Take a kind of uh, a little you know deviation here from the discussion from economics to the Middle East, the geopolitics that you're seeing right now, and how have things? We've had this attack by Hamas, the response over a year now. Syria just collapsed, was just taken, well, Assad was just kicked out. It didn't collapse. It had collapsed, I guess, in many ways, but Assad was just removed. The Russians seem to be evacuating from their naval and air force bases. Uh, Iran seems to have lost its circle of allies. How do you think was all this predictable at some level? Was it, well, maybe not predictable, whether or not it was predictable, how do you see things uh, evolving? Do you think, uh, I know there's been terrible casualties, civilian casualties in Gaza. So the human costs of this have been enormous, and the entire world is concerned about that, including Israelis. But I do want to get your take on, because I know you think about these things carefully, uh, about that, and also just more generally, Ukraine, China. Do you think China might
Well,
look at?
well, 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 let's keep the Middle East. It's complicated, before we solve all the problems in the world. Listen, first of all, in this point, I have to emphasize one thing, which is from now on, this discussion, I'm not talking as economist, I'm not talking as a professor, I'm talking as Ariel Rubinstein, identity number such and such. Namely, and that's important for me always to emphasize, nothing in my economic education or economic knowledge actually affects my views about these issues. And it's important to emphasize because there are some people who are doing the opposite, namely they explicitly or implicitly they say we are experts in economic theory or in game theory, and therefore we have a lot to say about the world, and I disagree with them, but we can talk about it later. But at the moment, let me emphasize, whatever they do, I don't talk with any authority to anything besides being an Israeli born, what we call tzabar, sabre. That's all. Prediction. I read newspapers quite a lot. I talk with people. I think that nobody predicted anything close to what's happened, neither in October 7th, what I call Simchat Torah, nor later, definitely not in the last few weeks, and who knows what the near future is going to reveal us. But it's not a prediction. I'm not. It's especially, by the way, I lost the possibility to predict anything about the future after actually not October 7th, but after November 2nd, 2 years ago. In November 1st, 2 years ago, there was the elections in Israel. Netanyahu, after a few campaigns that he did not succeed to win, then he clearly won the elections, and we had a new, very right-wing government, what they call pure right government. And in that point, actually, I did not think that things will go so badly as they did, and surprise after surprise after surprise came to my mind. So modestly, I tell all my friends, I lost any possibility to predict. And I don't think that other people predicted well as well. And now, look, there are several things to consider. There is one, of course, the strategic element of Israel within the Middle East. That's one issue. But there is another issue which, from my personal point of view, is much more important. And that's the internal issue of Israel. I was born in Israel. My parents came to Israel before the Second War, 35, 39, from Poland. They lost all their families in the diaspora. My name is on the two grandfathers, Ariel, Israel. They brought it together to be Ariel. So, and there is a meaning to us being here. I guess that I could be in the US. I never even thought about this possibility. It was clear to me that I am a Zionist, I'm an Israeli, I want to be here, that's my home, that's my society, and so on. But what's happened to Israeli society, especially in the last 2 years after those elections, is bringing even questions about the wisdom of the Zionist project. I'm still defining myself as Zionist, and I was born here, and I definitely will die here, and I don't consider living. But 2 years ago, if somebody would tell me I am considering going abroad, leaving Israel and going to finding some job in the US, I would make all my efforts to persuade him not to do it. And these days, at least I would say, probably I still will make the efforts, but I do understand better his concerns. And my concerns is not about physical life. I think that overall, when you look at the numbers of Israeli casualties, every person is a person, etc. But overall, the casualties of Israel in the fight, even since '48, were not so heavy relative to the population, etc., etc. But definitely not like in Ukraine or in Vietnam or in Palestine and so on. And of course, not like in the Second War. Something else. But a few days ago there was a siren in Tel Aviv. I never go even to the shelter. I think it's almost a joke. Namely, the probability to be hit from a car near my home here is much higher than to be hit from a missile from Yemen. It's more, but So it's not a personal the fear that Israel will be. I'm taking it seriously. I think that if Iran says that it wants to destroy Israel, they want to destroy Israel. If Israel would have the opportunity, them or the Hamas or somebody else would have the opportunity to wipe us from the maps, they would do it. I'm not taking it easily, but I think that Israel is strong enough. Even after this trauma of October 7th, I think that Israel is a superpower from a military point of view, and it's partially because of the intelligence, the high-tech industry, which is amazing. 50% of the Israeli export is high-tech. It's unbelievable, and etc. So Israel is strong, and I don't think that Israel will collapse physically. But the question, who we are, what's the meaning of being Israeli? What's the connection between us and the Judaism? What is the connection between us and the Messianic ideas that some of the Jews here, or also in New York, believe in? By the way, it's not only the Jews, as you might know better than me, it's also some of the supporters of Trump are believing in. This is something which I'm concerned very much. You mentioned, of course, personally, I don't know anybody who died in this war, but I think that my concerns are not only with the Israeli casualties and, of course, the kidnapped people, that it's amazing and terrible that Israel still did not did not go forward into a deal to free them. It's completely against the values that we were brought up on, and it's definitely connected not only with some strategic game theoretical considerations, but it's more connected with some political considerations of Netanyahu, who does in this respect very well, but absolutely against my beliefs. But what's happening in the Gaza Strip is not something, and by the way, not in the Gaza Strip also, it's also in the West Bank. It's not something, look, there are two issues. There is one issue about them. I mean, the Hamas attack was evil, was terrible, etc., and the words were already, tons of words already rightly were said about the Hamas. But now we don't control the Hamas, we control ourselves. And the question about our behavior in Gaza is something which I find historical mistake and unforgivable. Namely, we did have to attack the Hamas, we did have to kill some of the leaders, we did have, etc. But the amount of suffering that we impose on the Gaza people for a long time, and expelling actually most of the population from their homes, destroying their villages. At the time that some of the ministers in our cabinet or in the government are talking about settlements inside the Gaza Strip, which is probably one of the most dense areas in the world already, etc., is really a lack of human dehumanization of the enemy. And I think that, again, we were born both after the Second War, but one of the things that I'm fascinated and I admire the generation of our parents, or people that were victims of the Germans in the Second War and came to Palestine in between 45 and 48 and started the state. They did not deal with revenge. Of course, there were here and there some cases, but it's amazing that actually the Jews after the Second War did not deal with revenge. There were some groups who planned some sort of poisoning of the water in Germany, but they were stopped by some other people and they did not do it. There was not revenge. Revenge is not something that is of course, it's a natural feeling, I don't deny that, but the revenge, the problem is also the revenge of the Israelis against the Hamas is not just the problem of the morality of the revenge, it's also the link between this and the Messianic ideas. And Messianic ideas are not so much about the Gaza Strip. Although at the moment I've seen people here calling for settlements, by the way, not only in Gaza, but also in South Lebanon, and now, of course, in the Bashan, which is the area of what we call the Syrian Golan. But the main fight on the land here is in the West Bank. And in the West Bank, we control the land from 1967, and in the last, of course, already in 68, the settlement started. But of course, at the moment, in the last 20 years or so, it got more and more bad in the sense of pushing the Palestinians from their areas. And actually, and now comes the word that I will use, and I'm using it very intentionally. Even before October 7, before the events with Hamas, I'm recording on saying that I'm afraid that the feeling in Israel, that there is some atmosphere that makes kosher what we call Nakba 2. Nakba is it's a Arabic word, which the translation is catastrophe, and this is the way that the Arabs relate to 1948. So this is Nakba 1. What's happened in the last year I was afraid that there will be Nakba 2, and the Nakba 2 is even not in the entire West Bank, but it's in big areas of the West Bank. I was wrong. What happened, there is a Nakba 2 in Gaza Strip. And also there is some areas in the West Bank that settlers and the Israeli authorities use the opportunity to move some people, to get control of some land. That's the big problem. The big problem is that if the Israelis will become like our police minister, Ben-Gvir, and the number of his supporters is not infinitesimal, then, and in many respects, Israel executes some of his ideas. Israel will be still Israel. Israel will be still with the same flag, but it will not have the same meaning to me, and I think that to many people that I know, both in Israel and in the diaspora. That's the big fear. It's not the strategic problems against Iran. Of course, I'm not saying against. I'm not diminishing. I think Iran is a big problem. If Israel would not attack the Gaza, but Israel would attack counterattack Gaza, and Israel would attack Iran, I would not fully understand it. If Israel would attack in October, even before October last year, it would attack the Hezbollah in Lebanon. I'm not against wars. Take, for example, 1982. I think that's an interesting war. That's the First Lebanese War. First Lebanese War had two factors. There were two parts. There was one part that the Syrians moved anti-air missiles to Lebanon, and strategically it was very important to Israel to get rid of it, because this was actually the window for which the Israeli planes could get to Damascus. And we talked in 82, 9 years after the 73 terrible war. This was one part which I think it was fully justified by whatever casualties we had. And the second part was this dream of Ariel Sharon to get to Damascus, to Beirut, and to change the regime in Lebanon. We got to Beirut, we completely failed, we caused a lot of misery to Lebanese. We had many hundreds of Israelis dying. And the end, we withdrew without any achievements. We're just actually bringing the seeds to the Hezbollah and to the phenomena that we have seen here. So I'm not against wars which are really for their defending. I was serving in the army, and I would encourage everybody to serve in the army. But it's the army that should defend Israel. Israel is very proud that the name of our army is Israel Defense Forces. It's not Israel Attack Forces. It's not Israel suppressing the Palestinian forces. And but basically what much of the work that we do these days is suppressing the other people in a way that may be successful, not successful. I don't know. Some people will say that the history will punish us one day. Maybe yes, maybe not. I don't know. I cannot predict. But I'm sure that even if it's successful, then I think that it's a terrible thing against all the values that I was brought up, all the values that I feel that are connected with me and you being Jews.
So now your perspective is the majority perspective in Israel still at this point, right? Of
No,
or
no,
not?
no. I'm afraid that that's not the case. I think that there is a majority at the moment, according to the polls, against Netanyahu personally. But that's, that's small politics or big politics, but I don't think that's very interesting to discuss. I think that most of the Israeli population fully accepts what's happened in Gaza. I think that it's true that there was also a very interesting shift because a few days after the beginning of the war, then there was some Knesset member who said that we should flatten Gaza Strip and we should cause 100,000 deaths. And this was considered to be completely crazy, but basically that's what we have done. So it's not, the shift was that more and more Israeli public opinions did accept look, there is a clear majority in Israel, there is for the right-wing positions, because actually some of the opposition parties, like Lieberman party, the Russian party, and actually many of the gun supporters are quite right-wing. So there is clearly a majority of right-wing hawkish positions in Israel. So I don't think that that's a majority. But one of the things that I was disappointed in the last year was even some of my friends, and that's interesting from psychological phenomenon, that some people were so shocked from the attack of October 7. And of course there was brutality, which I fully understand why it triggered these responses. But there were, I remember one day that I talked with, every day morning I go to some cafe here, and I met somebody who told me she's a very nice person, very kind, very leftish, and she said, I don't have a place in my heart to the suffering of the Gaza people. This was around November last year. She changed her mind now. But I think that but there are still people who did not change their mind. I think that there is the brutality of Israel in Gaza Strip was overall accepted by the Israeli population. What will happen in the future? I believe that in the future, this is the way that things are going, is that more and more terrible stories will come out, and there will be more criticism, and some people will move to not to justify what's happening. But at the moment, unfortunately, I have to say that the voices against the way that Israel operates in Gaza exist, and in the last month or two, we definitely hear them more and more. But we talk now about 14 months after the beginning of the war, and for a very long time there was almost no voice. There were demonstrations. Demonstrations were about the Israeli position about the kidnapped. Not about I call it, I don't know what is the best word to call it, but the brutality of the Israeli response. That's a mild way to describe it.
Yeah. Now, so you think there was a way to fight Hamas, militarily in Gaza without bombing things like hospitals, where the Israeli government military is saying that that's being used by Hamas?
I'm sure
You
that
think that?
some hospitals were used by the Hamas. I'm sure that some of the schools were by the Hamas, and so on and so on. It's of course you want to wipe out completely the Hamas up to the last Hamas person. Then you have to kill all the population, and you are done. But there is some sort of proportion.
Reality, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Of course,
how you do it. I'm not a general. I don't believe that Israel, but it's not just, I don't know what's happened in one battle or another, but I do. But again, I'm looking at the outcome. The outcome is Israel does not allow the Palestinians to go back to the north of the Gaza Strip. We talk about such a small area about the blockade on food and equipment. The amount of suffering of the Gaza people in the last 14 months, definitely, let's say that there is necessary for 1 month, but two for 6 weeks, I don't know. But to have it for such a long period, that's something which is, from my point of view, is completely unacceptable. Including also there were some stories about some misbehavior of Israeli soldiers. I'm sure that the stories are much more terrible than these stories. But there was basically there was no serious investigation. Nobody was put on trial or doing some sort of what we call crime, a war crime. It's overall the feeling we don't care about them. Every day we talk about 40, 50, 60 Palestinians in Gaza are killed in operations. Few of them are Hamas people. And of course we don't count the number of Palestinians that will die because of the suffering. If you don't have health services, and they don't affect about the mortality of people, so we can save billions of dollars from solve all the budget problems of the US, right? But that's not the case. I mean, health services are important in many respects. I mean, from time to time I think about how could a person live in Gaza Strip for such a period. Let's say that he have a dent, the problem that he have to go to a dentist, something he cannot. It's unbelievable.
yeah. So,
But again, it's not only the Gaza Strip, because the intentions of Israel are revealed more clearly in the West Bank. The West Bank, okay, I'm not against operation against, and in the territories, Israel is when they attack terrorists in what they call terrorists or we call terrorists in the West Bank, they are doing quite sterilely, and it's not they don't kill, they don't wipe out a neighborhood in order to kill 5 terrorists. They do it quite well. But in the West Bank, again, the behavior which is pushing, suppressing in order to get rid of the Palestinians is not, again, it's most of the Israeli population either don't think about it, pretend they don't know, or support it. And there are unfortunately very few people that really care about it.
so let me ask you, is there any chance that the Palestinians themselves would change strategy? I mean, the strategy that they seem to have adopted since 48 has been, to fight militarily one way or another. And as you said at the beginning, the goal of some segment is to wipe out Israel, all the Israelis, kick them into from the river to the sea. Sounds like let's have another Holocaust. Uh, now that's not presumably the majority, or even more than a small minority of Palestinians, but they're the ones that have the guns. Now that they won't have such easy access to guns, is it possible that they could become a nonviolent? It could be a nonviolent movement. My sense is that if the Palestinians adopted the tactics of Gandhi, that they would end up with a state very quick. Now, tell me if that's just being naive.
I think it's a bit naive because, by the way, the river to the sea, but at the moment is a slogan. I know that in the US it's used a lot, and the meaning is very clear. But notice also that this is used by the Israelis, or some Israelis at least as well. from the river to the sea, and these days even beyond the river. The Golan Heights is beyond the river. So I'm not saying that it's symmetric, but it's less asymmetric than it seems. Now, I don't think, look, the first Intifada in 87 was started actually quite a non-violent event. And the Israeli response, by the way, Rabin was the defense minister at the time, so it's not only the right wing, was very, very violent. So the Israelis, I was living in Jerusalem for many years, and I've seen some events which were very peaceful from the Palestinian point of view, and the response of the Israelis was also very violent. I think many Israelis understand that Gandhi probably was more
Effective, yeah.
for the Palestinian than Arafat, at least the beginning, and they would actually crush them by more military, less military. There are some other ways to crush political activities. But at the moment, I don't think that it's not a matter. Some people think otherwise. But let me say again, I think that I know Israel a little bit. Even in Israel, I feel that I don't know. Israel is so diverse, and to say that I do know all the groups in Israel, I cannot say that. Of course, I don't know the Palestinians. When is the last time that I was talking with a Palestinian? I don't know. It's probably many years ago. I talked with some Israeli Palestinians, with Israeli citizens, but not in the territories. I do go from time to time to the territories. I'm not allowed by the Israelis, actually not by the Palestinians, to get into Ramallah or Nablus or whatever. I'm not allowed from my point of view. I did not do it. But and most Israelis don't know where is the West Bank. But they feel that we need to control it, and there are enough Israelis who wants to be there. So I don't know. I don't know even to predict the Israeli population, and I don't know what the Palestinians will be. But some people say in Israel, some of the justifications that I hear, okay, see what happened to Japan and Germany after the Second War, they completely changed and so on. Will the Palestinians, after the terrible defeat that they had in Gaza, will they have the same response like the Japanese or the German? These are different people, different mentalities, different, etc., etc. Its religion is involved here and so on. I don't know. Maybe not. Personally, I'm not optimistic, but it's not based on enough information.
Having written about, tried to introduce this very critically important element of reality power into economics, if you look at the long history of countries and their conflicts, you just mentioned the U.S. and Japan and Germany. We dropped 2 bombs in 3 days or 4 days, killed 200,000 people, and the justification was this is going to save a million Americans' lives from invading Japan because they were going to fight to the end. I guess I'm asking whether we would expect Israelis or Jews to act any differently. It's not that one could certainly say to think back historically and say that Truman made an immoral decision there, that he should have done more, he should have exploded the bomb in places that were not populated, should have, and he was not in a rush to, as long as we had one bomb that worked, we had a test that did work, he had enough time to continue to show Japan that we had the ability to wipe out uh, their population as much as we wanted with these new weapons, all from a distance. But we kind of showed that also with the firebombing of Tokyo, which probably killed even more people than Hiroshima. Uh, and we showed that with the firebombing, we in the UK, of Dresden. I guess my wandering question here, meandering question, is whether we should expect any society that has the power and is being kind of continually attacked or threatened to act fundamentally differently from what we've seen so many other uh, countries, civilizations, or hegemonic entities engage in over time. If we take this long historical perspective, if you go back to the Bible, we have, God giving the land of Canaan to the Jews, and it's pretty in a pretty tough way. Basically, I think I'm not much of a Bible scholar. I haven't really read it, so I'm just kind of uh, reflecting what I think I've heard is that it's basically, let's take this land as yours. So I've given it to you, and no consideration really for the Canaanites who are living there. So just from that perspective, setting apart morality, if you can, would you?
Look, the morality of the Jewish people was developed since the Bible. If we accept the Bible, the Old Testament rules, and for example, the treatment of women should be also be justified, and you can say also that most societies treat women in a very bad way, or etc., etc. So there are many things that you can say about many, but I think, look again, Israel is not just my perspective. Israel is not, I mean, would America, the US, or Britain, or Germany, or the Russia will respond differently to the Hamas attack? Maybe not. I'm not, but again, I don't care. I don't care about. I understand the feeling. I understand the feeling of revenge. But the fact that these are the norms, if they are the norms, then it's not justified. Because again, I think that we were brought up on a position that we should care first of all about what we do, and we should judge ourselves, and not to just compare ourselves to other people. Again, I'm not against wars, and I'm not against defending ourselves. I'm not against killing people where it is really necessary. But notice again, it's not just a matter, the Israeli policy at the moment, and therefore I direct attention to the West Bank. The position is not just defense. There are many generals who explain many times that actually Israel does not need to hold Nablus and Ramallah and so on or Gaza in order to defend ourselves. It's more a burden than a security asset. But there is another purpose. I don't think that the US wanted to settle Americans in Japan or in Germany. This was not the issue. And the fight that we have here is not just about the defense, even if Israel, sometimes some Israelis pretend that it's only for defense. It's not only for defense, and just listen to the Israeli leaders, listen to the Israeli rabbis, listen to the Israeli population. It's not about the defense, it's about something else. And something else, something that cannot. Now, look again, many of us, I have only Israeli citizenship. When I was in the States, I even did not want to have green card, and still I don't want to have green card. But, many Israelis have double citizenship. Why do they have double citizenship? Because they want to protect themselves, they want to have the opportunity to one day to settle in another place. There is another place. They can go to the US, they can go to Portugal, they can go to even to Germany, and many of them. And the fact that we are here is not just in order to fight. It's in order to have society which has some. It should also protect our life against the anti-Semitism, etc., etc. But it's also to have society which we are proud about, and that the world will look at us with admiration and not with in the way that many of the people in the world, rightly so, look at Israel, which is as a suppressing power that uses that behave in the jungle like in the jungle. And that's what we want to be. I mean, we know that it's a jungle, but this does not mean that we should behave like the lion in the jungle. By the way, it's also there is the issue which is whether it's worthy to behave like that, because the world does not stop tomorrow. What we ever Israel already experienced, the fact that Israel beat the Palestinians again and again and again, actually even before 48, but let's say 48, in 67, in the first Intifada, in the second Intifada, in Lebanon, in the Gaza Strip now, and still the Palestinians don't disappear. And if they will disappear tomorrow to Jordan or to the US, they will continue to fight from there. I mean, once you beat the other side, it's not the end of the story. Today, our technology is superior. Is it clear that it will be always like that? Is it clear that can you predict what will be the superpowers in the future? Who will be with whom? I don't think so. And I think making the other people suffering so much. Usually, I think in this respect, by the way, the Jews after the Second War is the exception. It's an exception in the fact that you would expect the revenge after the Second War to the Germans or to the Poles or whoever, or Ukrainians, would be much, 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 much beyond imagination. And it did not happen. It did not happen not because there was no possibility, but it was because actually instead of dealing with revenge, the generation of our parents dealt with establishing a state, which was not obvious at all, and accomplishing some building society that has of course some deficiencies, but there's also fantastic achievements in many dimensions, cultural, first of all.
Let me ask you, have you ever thought about running for office?
Sorry?
Have you ever thought about running for office?
Me? No. No, I think that I'm a very bad politician. Whenever, I was twice, I was in 77 after the Begin got to power. With some friends of mine in Jerusalem, we constructed a political movement which was called, by the way, I started as a right winger, I should say. If I'm encouraged about something, is that in my first elections, in 69, I voted for a party which is more or less like the current Ben-Gvir party, which is extreme right wing. But I moved after 8 years. In 77, we constructed a small political movement. It was called the Movement for Different Zionism. And this was supposed to be anti the Begin's right wing. And then in 78, we initiated, another person who was involved in it, Moti Perry, was also in BU for a while, and we were initiated what is called the officers' letter in 78, calling for concessions that Israel with the negotiation with Sadat, and then I was involved in the Peace Now movement. But so for about 2 years of my life I spent on politics, but it's not the politics for running to the parliament, but it's politics. And I know I think that I know myself, but I'm very bad in politics. And so no, definitely not in this stage of life.
Well, anyway, this has been a delight talking to you. I think we'll have to do another one to get more into your enormous volume of work. But I think gave people a taste of you as a theorist, you as a social scientist, an academic, but also as a humanist and also as a proud Israeli. So let's hope.
Thank you very much. Let me emphasize again what you said already, that if anybody from the audience want to get any of my writings, papers or books, by principle, all my books are free on the web. You can download it freely as many times as you wish. And that's the idea. And think especially there is one book which is called Economic Fables, which I published about 12 years ago, which is more general, directed to a more general audience, in which I express some of my views about at least the economics, which it's more chatty. It's actually my only chatty book that I've ever
No
written.
Greek symbols.
Sorry?
No Greek symbols in that book. No Greek symbols.
There are few, but it's quite chatty.
And you want to give a quick summary of that before we
I think the summary basically is that but you can again the title economic fables. The idea is not to say, by the way, economic fables is plus, not minus. It's not giggling at economic theory. It's saying it's fables. Fables in a positive sense. I think that I treat economic model as a fable. A fable may be interesting and or not, may have some impact on our way of reasoning or not. It's successful, it is. But it's not a model like in the sciences, something else. And this was the emphasis of this book.
way to think to expand our thinking, expand our minds, and maybe change our behavior somehow.
It's look, to be honest, I think that the story of Chekhov, I'm obsessed with Chekhov, story of Chekhov might change behavior of human being much more than any economic paper that I know. So if I had the ability to write like Chekhov, I would be a writer and definitely would not do economics. And that's probably content of one of the papers that I want to write in the future. So wait.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Ariel. This is
Not at all, Larry. It was a pleasure.